Hi, this is a small bachelor apartment where I do my work, and it's about a 5-minute walk from where we live in the ancient left bank section of Prague called the Malá Strana. And of course, today I want to welcome you here and tell you what I can remember about UPA. Those 3 eggs really live in my memory, even though it was 64 years since I first went to work there. And in those days, it was the Otto K. Olson building. I think it's Selma and Vine in Hollywood. We had a little rooftop apartment, rooftop studio, and we had big dreams. We had big dreams. It was in those days. In those days, we didn't have the 3 eggs. It was still the industrial film and poster service, but it was a seething little group with plans for the future. We were an animation studio, a cultural group, a political group, art discussion group, and I was absolutely full of myself being part of it. As a matter of fact, it was the very first job in animation I ever had. I hadn't worked in any animation studio at all before, and that was, in my case, it was an advantage because Stephen and Hub thought, well, I wasn't spoiled by Disney. I wasn't spoiled by the house style of the other animation studios, and they thought I was fresh meat. Steve, in fact, put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Gene, we're going to mold you into the first true UPA director." Well, of course, that covered up the fact that they were paying me peanuts. I started, of course, as an apprentice production designer. I finally got to be production designer when I got in the union, and I worked with Bob Cannon. But getting to be a director among all those items was, among all those titans, was really something for the future. It was in 1951, finally, when Steve sent me to New York with a founding group of the New York studio. There was Grim Natwick and Abe Liss and Barbara Baldwin and myself. The only key person that hadn't arrived yet was Wardell Gaynor, a cameraman. So the Howdy Doody show on NBC was probably the first daily color television show. It was a big success. But we had heard, because I had just met Alan Swift, who was acting on the show at that time, that there was a lot of unrest in the Howdy Doody studio, and there were all the puppeteers and other voice men were, everybody was looking to make more money. And I think that what the producers had in mind by coming to us was that we would be making a cartoon version of the show, which would give them something they could put on television without having all of those other people to pay. And they were probably expecting us to really closely reflect the way the show looked. But the thing was, we at UPA, we consider ourselves avant-garde artists. We were at the cutting edge of animation in those days, and we thought the Howdy Doody character, the puppet, and the whole show was just kitsch, and we thought we could show them how it could be made with up-to-date design. And so we went ahead and at that time I had gotten Cliff Roberts, I brought in from Detroit, and Dwayne Crowther from Hollywood came in, and we formed a little group to make this Howdy Doody show. We had no money, so we went to a paper cutout technique, but I had all kinds of ideas about how to make transitions and camera effects and things we were just experimenting with in those days. So we thought we would make this film and that they would see a better way to present Howdy Doody. Of course, we were dreaming. When the film was finished, they actually hated it. And Buffalo Bob Smith ordered the negative destroyed. And I was absolutely dismayed, heartbroken, because we thought we had done something really great. And I spent the next 50 years, actually, we made this film 58 years ago from today. Today, 2010, that was 1952. And from about 1950, I started looking desperately with every contact I could find to try to find if there was possibly an existing print left of this film, without any success whatever. And I had actually given up ever seeing my first film again. Well, my first film that said directed by Gene Deitch. That's what I guess why it had a meaning to me. It was the first film in which I had my direction title onto it. So I had just about given up when just about 2 months ago, I got word that a print had actually been discovered in the archives of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Somebody had preserved our original presentation print, and unfortunately not stored well. It was badly deteriorated. It's got all kinds of flickering in it, but we were able to restore it, especially bring up the soundtrack, which we had a beautiful music track by a composer named Serge Hovey. I was very proud of the music of this film. And as I said, certain tricks and things which we were just learning how to do. Very simple kind of a film, nothing by today's standards, but for me it had a great personal meaning. And I have to give my thanks to Jerry Beck, who was the person who really got the lead on this and premiered it on his Cartoon Brew website, which some of you may have already seen. But here's a chance for you to look at this film and evaluate it in terms of what it is now and what it was then. The biggest success we had with the public in those days was with the Bert and Harry peeled beer commercial. These characters in black and white television at that time became actually stars in the eastern part of the United States. And a lot of people told us that our commercials were much better than the beer itself. In fact, when we finally finished the series, the beer itself gurgled down the drain forever. The credit for these commercials was widely spaced. There was the creator of the idea was Ed Graham, a writer at the Young and Rubicam advertising agency, and Jack Sidebottom, who made the first roughed out storyboard. But I then refined the characters and staged the animation. The real stars, of course, turned out were the voice actors Bob and Ray, Bob Elliott and Ray Goulding. They caught the characters just right, and I think that they really deserve the credit for the great success of these films. There was even merchandising on these characters, like special beer coasters and this little Bert and Harry pin. The major film we did in those days, the early days of UPA New York, was called Pump Trouble, sponsored by the American Heart Association. It was a two-reeler, and it was a chance for us to really try to do something very special. I had an idea of structuring it on the basis of Citizen Kane with backflashes of the character, and we had a chance to try out a lot of interesting tricks in this film. There's a scene in there you'll see where the hero is riding on a sled, and the man who's pulling him disappears, and the sled, of course, is a slight echo to the Rosebud of Citizen Kane. It was a big deal for me, and I met Alan Swift in the course of this production. After interviewing all kinds of other voice actors, he was somebody who could do all 8 voices perfectly, and I think it really turned out to be his tour de force. Also, I found a fantastic Spanish composer named Carlos Surinac who made the music. And so all the things came together for this film, and I really I felt it was a major effort. But because it was an industrial film, as it were, a sponsored film, it was practically never seen by the public. So you'll have a chance to see it today if you haven't already. The interesting thing about the title, of course, Pump Trouble, the pump refers to your heart, and the hero's name was Cordell Pump, and I loosely figured the name Cordell from cardiac. So that's the kind of way we were thinking. There are a lot of tricky transitions in this film, an attempt to do something good, and I think, well, after this also is almost 58 years old, and leave it up to you to see how you think it stands up after all this time. The amazing thing was that way back at the beginning in Hollywood, we had actually believed that we were making animation history. We thought we saw ourselves as a revolutionary movement. We sincerely believed that we'd be changing the world of animation. I think John Hubley actually did. At UPA, there were two basic things. I'm sorry. Okay, I got to start again. Yeah, yes, yeah, no. Where was I? Yeah.
Kamera ide. Sorry.
Okay. The amazing thing is that way back at our Hollywood beginnings, we really thought that we were making animation history, that we were going to change the world of animation. I think John Hubley actually did. Basically, working for UPA existed on two levels, a creative exhilaration and internal turmoil. Plots were always brewing. Perhaps you might be discussing that history. But we know that it was actually the evil of the McCarthy period that was the hammer blow that finally did us in. My memory goes back to those days all the time, and I'm always thinking about it. In fact, I've already written a history of how it really was in the original UPA studio in Hollywood. And you can look at it at this address at www.awn.com/Gene Deitch. That's part of my book, How to Succeed in Animation. I think it's chapter 11. And there you can, I think I fill in exactly what it was really like in the early days of animation. My heart goes back there constantly. That is my roots, and I always keep them in everything I'm doing now, trying to live up to what John Hubley and Steve Bozzusto kept telling me I was going to be. I don't know if I ever made it or not, but I know that that is my goal, that's my example. I'd really like to hear from you. I think you know my email address. This is it, genedeitch@yahoo.com. And I hope that I'll be able to see you in July when I'm planning to go. I'm sorry I couldn't be there now. I really know I should be, but I've got too much to do. Goodbye and good luck.